To oversimplify it, your brain has two hemispheres, right? A left brain and a right brain. Your left brain is your logical brain, your right brain is your emotional brain. Because you have two different hemispheres and they operate on two different bases, right? One is based in logic, one is based in emotions. They actually operate and they process at different speeds. Your logical brain processes much slower than your emotional brain, which is why it takes you an instant before you're scared, but it takes you maybe minutes, hours, weeks before you're convinced. So what ends up happening is fear in an untrained person, going back to our conversation about trained versus untrained, in an untrained person, fear is an emotion that's processed by the emotional brain very quickly. So then they react instinctively to their fear. That's where a lot of people who suffer from anxiety get held back. When you can train someone to understand that the same thing that makes them emotionally scared is also being processed by their logical brain. Your brain is actually going through the process of determining how scared you really need to be. If you can just slow down the emotional brain and train the rational brain to work a little bit faster, your whole relationship with fear completely changes.
How do they train you to slow down your emotional brain so that you don't react?
That's a big part of the reason why you have a controlled training environment that lasts for multiple months. Because what they do is they inoculate you. It's called stress inoculation. They inoculate you with scenarios designed specifically to trigger your emotional response. Even though you have been trained to not trust your emotional response, they inoculate you so that over and over again, you have to go through the process of, I feel fear, I have to not accept it. I feel doubt, I have to reject it. I feel like I'm being watched, I have to reject it. I have to give my rational brain a chance to catch up so that I can get objective facts about the scenario. And there are some people who don't do it well. There are some people who never inoculate themselves against fear, so then they end up getting cut from the farm.
So for the average Joe that's listening to this now, or Jenny, the average Jenny that's listening to this now, and they live a life that's held them back because of their fear. You know, they don't take the risk. They don't raise their hand to do the presentation. They don't lean into uncertainty. Based on your training in the CIA, what would you suggest that they should do to get over that fear?
So they need to inoculate themselves as well.
Inoculate means
expose yourself in controlled ways to fear. Very similar to the way you inoculate against COVID or you inoculate against the flu, right? You expose yourself to a strain that's weakened so that your body can gain some sort of familiarity with it. You do the same thing with fear. So if you're afraid to give that presentation, you're not ever going to change the fact that you're afraid to give a presentation, but you will be able to change something that you're less afraid of. So if you're afraid of going to the gym, if you're afraid of eating at a certain restaurant down the street, if you're afraid of stepping out of your front door, if you're afraid of asking your friend their opinion about whether or not you're overweight, find something small where you are less afraid of this than you are of this other thing, and inoculate yourself with this. Like lean into the small fears, the fears that you already know are kind of irrational and simple. And if you can overcome those, what will happen is you will start to gain momentum. And the thing that you do to inoculate yourself is to know up front, you know you're going to have an emotional reaction. You already know it. It's the thing that you're afraid of. You can predict that. So you already know, I'm going to ask my buddy Steve if he thinks that I'm overweight. I'm terrified to ask him. He's either going to say yes or no, or he's going to take some cop-out answer and ask me what I think. But I already know that it's going to feel uncomfortable. But he's my buddy. It's low risk. Let's see how it happens. Let's see what it goes, right? So you go and you ask the question. You put yourself in the face of fear. You're still going to have the heart palpitations, the cold sweats. Your emotional brain's going to take off, and all of your physiology is going to let loose. But then Steve is going to tell you his answer, and it's over. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. And then when you do the same thing with your friend Jenny, and the same thing with your friend Bruce, and the same thing with your friend Robert, by the time Robert tells you his answer, your body's not reacting the same way as it did when you talked to Steve. Small inoculations are training your emotional brain to slow down and training your rational brain to speed up. So then you move on to the next most scary thing without going to the scariest of things.
I was thinking about that as you were talking, and I was thinking, gosh, I think a lot of people know that. I think they know that the way to get better at speaking on stage is to go and speak on stage, but they're still held back by, oh God, if I do that, I'm going to mess up, and then people are going to think I'm this, that, and the other, and then I'll never X, Y, Z.
Right.
So you can say that to someone, but getting them to take that first step seems to be the impossibility.
And here's where the former CA officer in me comes out. Because if you're too afraid to do that, good. I don't want you to do it. Because you being unable to do it gives me the advantage. The person who's listening to this, who says to themselves, I'm scared, but I'll do it anyways, that's the person who deserves the opportunity to change their life. The person who's listening to this that says, I'm too scared to do that, good. I need you to stay exactly where you are. Because in our world, the flat out truth is, our world needs cogs. Our world needs people who are trapped in the consumer cycle. We need